we can start with the presentation proper. So there are three. This presentation has three parts. This brief introduction, pointing out where Busamang is and some of the challenges it has been facing. Then some characteristics of the village, and finally the main question of this talk today is to discuss how to support subnational leaders who promote peace and civil rights. Now, this Gandhi King network studies big human civil rights leaders in India and in the USA, but they know that there are a lot of smaller leaders, let's put it that way, and they want to hear from us how we think they can be supported. Now, for those who haven't been there, this is Schneider Point, the kind of main the main beach of Busamang. This picture is from the 1950s, but for those who have been there, not much has changed really. The church now is made of stone, but for the rest, it's very similar. So that already prompts you to think, well, what's going on there? This village is just a short boat ride from the second largest city and the port of Papua New Guinea. So what does this mean? Now, very quickly, most of you know where it is, but Papua New Guinea is north of Australia, and Lae, the main port, is connected by air for about an hour and a half. But first, you need to go to the capital, which is Port Moresby. And oddly, Papua New Guinea is a country where the port is not connected to the capital, so you have to take another internal flight to Lae, which is a bit of a waste of time. Then in Lae, you can take a small speedboat, which takes you to Busamang Village in about 50 minutes. Here again, there are two pictures of how it was then and how it's now. As I said, the church is now made of stone, but the houses are still made from natural materials. Now, why is Busamang such an important place? Now, of course, there is a subjective reason there. It's a beautiful village, and their people are very welcoming and friendly. It was always an important place in the Stone Age. It was the only source of greenstone to make stone axes. So that has always been busy there with people looking for the resource. The second main reason is that its history is very well known. Dr. Ian Hogbin, who was one of the students of Malinowski at the London School of Economics, he wrote no less than 3 major books on this village. He is considered one of the founders of the anthropology of social change. The first book from 1951 is called Transformation Scene, and that book is still a required reading for most first-year anthropology courses in the world. So that is how famous this village is. The second book from 1963 is a lot more technical. It's less well known, and it analyzes the kinship relations in the village. And then there is a third book published a few years later, which has essays on different topics on the time use of the villages and various other topics. Hogbin has also worked in Solomon Islands and also in the Sepik region. So he's a real specialist for the Pacific anthropology. The third reason to focus on Busamang today is that they have exceptional community leaders who are acknowledged as peace builders in the whole Yuan Gulf area. And that means those are people that you can work with. And since 2017, we've built up a very good relationship with them, and they have never disappointed us in any way. So Busamang is a good village to work with. Here is a map from one of Hogbin's books about the language groups. The main geographical point is the peninsula of Salamua, which is where the resource for making the stone axes was to be found in pre-colonial times. And you can see that there are a lot of language groups around Salamua. So everybody wanted to settle around that place because that is where all their tools came from. Now, the language group that Busama people belong to, if I'm not mistaken, is this Gava group, which is the same group as you find in Leh and in much of the coastal area towards the east. So it's a rather big language group. The village of Busama is also mixed. There are originally two ethnic groups, but actually they have kind of merged. So that is the situation there. This is a very rare map, which I found in the Australian National Archive, and it's from 1923. And this was the time that the League of Nations had this mandate policy. So the former colonies of Germany, which this was, they were given as a mandate to other powers. Now, in this case, this was Australia, and Australia was not a very good administrator, to be frank. On the one hand, they did a lot of excellent scientific research with these anthropologists. Now, Hogbin was one, but on the other hand, the administration was awful. The red areas are the areas where, where the Australians thought they had expropriated the land and turned it into state land. But as most of you know, that did not solve the numerous land conflicts in Papua New Guinea, which are still going on and are often accompanied by tribal fighting still. Now, in Busamang, they have been able to solve their land issues, which they also have through peaceful negotiation. So that is really a big plus. There have been no violent tribal fights there for at least the last 50 or 60 years. Now, a bit about the political organization, which is relevant for our topic today. The coastal areas of Papua New Guinea generally have a mixed patrilineal and matrilineal system. So the highlands, they tend to be patrilineal, and they are more warrior cultures. The men have a lot of power. On the PNG Islands, it's matrilineal, so the women own the land and have a lot of power. And this coastal area is kind of mixed. Now, that is important because, for example, in the local language, there is no name for clan, the male clan, right? So they are called the men who garden together. That is the only word they have. And in the old days, they would meet in political clubs to discuss bigger projects like the building of houses or the building of a large trading canoe or things like that. Now, that tradition of consensus seeking and the men not having all the power, that's still very much alive. But of course, now it has they have different names for the various political organizations they have internally. They also have a migration policy traditionally. Because the area saw a lot of immigrants, if single men come, they are generally adopted by one of the male clubs and given some land to use to cultivate their gardens. So there is a very open migration policy in this sense. Now, if larger groups come, which also happened in the past, then an agreement has to be brokered, and a separate piece of land is set aside for this group. And this is what has happened in Busamang in the old days. Now, the single men who are adopted, like myself, we are members of the village, but if we don't live there, of course, that membership becomes more symbolic. But we have no voting rights. So everything has to be discussed through my brothers. So if I want to visit, I have to ask them permission. I have to ask them permission for everything. And that's what I do. Now, if I make a mistake, which happens also a lot, they will tell me that I breaking custom, that I'm not doing the things right. So it has several advantages for me to go through that. So again, here you have a picture of the old days where they have a house building feast. They're probably eating sago, I think. And then on the right is a meeting of people from the university with some of the elders in the Hausman in the main parliament, let's say, of the village. Now, this traditional structure, unfortunately, was messed up by the missionaries, and then later in the wartime, through the Australians and the Japanese. The missionaries abolished initiation, and by doing so, they took away the highest executive level, which were the headmen. Now, that in turn gave the second level the opportunity to abuse their power. And on the left, you see the famous Bumbu. Now, the anthropologist Hogbin, he devoted a whole chapter to Bumbu's power abuse. He created a lot of problems, and I believe that this was also at the root of the missionaries leaving the village around independence. So that has been a really upsetting situation. So the second executive level, they're usually given the Tolai name that was introduced by the German administration. So the Luluai are the chiefs, but traditionally the chiefs did not speak, not even pidgin. So they were always accompanied by a tultul, usually a family member, who acted as a translator. Now today, in the structure of the state of Papua New Guinea, the Luluai is the village councillor and the tultul is the deputy councillor. So they're given the modern names, but the tradition is actually from the German administration. And these people were, chosen or elected internally within the villages. When the outsiders come in and they appoint a village chief, usually things go terribly wrong. You can see Bumbu, he had this, captain's hat. They usually took kind of the tallest guy and the most confident guy from the village, put a hat on his head, and then said, "Now you're the chief." So that created a lot of ill will. I'm not going into that now, but if you want to read all the gossip about Bumbu, then chapter 8 of Transformation Scene explains everything. Now, as I said, the women are also quite important in this village. Let me see, I should get the next slide now. Now, it is, of course, a traditional village, so they will tend to focus on, child care and food preparation. Here is a beautiful picture of all the ladies, including my wife, Paulina, for the goodbye banquet that they made. That's a real feast. They are excellent cooks, and frankly, some of the best meals I ever had, I had in this village or other villages. They are really, really expert cooks. And in Busamang, they have an important also political role, but their meetings tend to be more around the cooking and the care for the children. Here is another picture of the children. There are quite a lot of them, as you can see. Here you see Paulina giving a baby pack to a newborn. One of the interventions from Australia is a volunteer group of ladies in Brisbane who prepare these so-called baby packs, which have some essentials which new mothers need. And we were able to bring them to the village, and that was greatly appreciated. Again, very simple intervention, cost maybe $10, but it helps the women and the babies quite a lot. Here is a baby transportation system, the old picture and the new picture. The new picture was actually a white baby that we were able to bring there. And that caused, of course, a lot of commotion. The women had not seen a white baby for many decades. So everybody wanted to have, a piece of her. But of course, eventually she got tired, and they put her in a big bilum, a bag, where she slept like an angel. And the parents were actually very happy because this baby had trouble sleeping, but in this bilum she slept very well. Then a bit about the economics, not too much, but Busamang is famous for its sago. That's because there are a lot of freshwater resources, and as you can see on the old pictures, it has to be pounded out of the palm tree, but then it also has to be washed carefully because it has traces of arsenic. So that is still one of the main cash crops in Busamang. Fishery has gone down a lot, so they mainly fish for subsistence, and there are one or two guys who sometimes sell some fish in town, but it's not a lot. This is the old school and the new building. The old school was actually built with funds from a kind of a Marshall Plan after the war. The Australian government, which was still the colonial government, they found, they wanted to compensate the village for all the mayhem they had suffered during the war. So they built this school, which is still there, as you can see. But of course now it's much too small because it houses not only children from the village itself, but also from the neighboring areas, which by now are quite populated. In the 1960s, when the missionaries were still there, the village had public water supply, and it also had electricity. It seems amazing. And of course, when they chased off the missionaries during independence, then all of that collapsed. As you can see, some of these children have blonde hair. The Melanesian area is known for having naturally blonde hair people with brown skins. So it's not because some missionary did something naughty, it's because they are naturally blonde or reddish hair. Now, the first intervention that we did was to bring a medicine supply. They have an excellent nurse who was given the name of Anne Boleyn by one of the missionaries, one of the wives of Henry VIII. She runs this tiny little clinic, which is, quite run down. Now, what made me very angry in the beginning was that they have we have a brand new clinic, but it's never been used. I'll show you the pictures a bit later. The transport of the medicine and other supplies is quite complicated because The jetty they have is also run down and it's not operational. So you have to carefully navigate towards the church, avoiding all the reefs, and then land on the beach. So this is how we would always go with Pelly and Lemuel, who you can see there. And the guy rowing in the other picture is one of the villagers who works for the university. And his two daughters by now are the second and the third university graduates from the village, which is actually not a lot. So the access to education has been an issue. The first university graduate is graduated in the capital, and he was one of the provincial administrators who built the clinic, but that is another story. Now, dancing is still very important. Here you can see the old picture, the new picture. The costumes have changed a bit, but whenever there is a foreign visitor, there has to be dancing, there has to be eating. They're very formal in that sense. Their dances, they're similar to those in Siasi Islands, although they speak a different language there. But for them, that it means that all these Yuan Gulf and island populations were once, they're all brothers and sisters. So it's a sign of cultural unity, the dancing. Now here you have finally Toby and Moses, in the old, the counselor and the deputy counselor, now the Lolua and the Tultul. Here they're giving their speeches, thanking the university for giving the new supply of medicines. Below you see the famous red suitcase with medicines in the houseman, in the house of the men. And then the other picture is me chatting with the nurse and Toby about the village affairs. So here you get an impression how this is. Now I'm going to round up now quickly. What does this village need? You know, that was one of the questions I asked, and you always get different answers from the men and the women. The women tend to focus on healthcare because of pregnancy and childbirth are a major risk for them, and without any medicine or supplies, it's really difficult. So that was the first thing we did. We supplied them for about a year with medicine. And that's, as you see, is about $2,000 a year, is not much. The men, they are very interested in rebuilding a tourist lodge so that they can host people and earn some money. They have all the supplies, they put in all the work, but they need a chainsaw mill to saw the planks and rebuild the lodge. Then last year, Lemuel asked them again what they needed, and they would really love some school uniforms for the school. Now, as you can see, there are quite a lot of children there because of the surrounding villages. I figured that the unit cost of uniform is about $25. So for about $10,000, you can buy the uniforms for the children. These children, they only have one set of clothes. So smelly children or children who are not dressed properly, that's a real problem for the school teachers. And it also works very badly for their self-esteem because all the children in the city, they have school uniforms, but the village children do not have it. Then here you find the water supply for the clinic. As I said, the reason that the clinic was never used is that they chose the wrong source of water, which dried up. So they only need some materials to change the water pipes to the right place, and then the clinic can open. And the project was budgeted very tightly, and they were unable to do this. The other issue they have is with the village water supply. It's in an area that is sinking. At the same time, as you know, in the Pacific, the sea level is rising slowly. So eventually they will see their village water supply disappear, and that is another reason for worry. Now, as you can see, these are very high impact interventions, and they cost next to nothing. So tomorrow, when I present to the US-based network, I really want them to suggest some possible donors and see if we can get things moving. Here are the kids. The yellow kids are from the city, and then you see a village kid, which just has a short, and that's it. Not the same thing. All right, to round up, in many countries, decolonization and independence have produced constitutions which on paper guarantee civil rights, but these regimes have not brought prosperity, better health, or education. So the economic civil rights are completely ignored. As Busamang is also a case of developing backwards. As I said, in the 1960s, they had electricity, they had water, they had proper schools. But since then, the whole village has been neglected for over 40 years. The state has done next to nothing, and the situation has become worse. As a reflection, what I would like to show is that there are simple low-cost options to help local leaders and strengthen their position. If we are able to look beyond technical assistance, which is supposed to be apolitical, and help those leaders who help themselves and who have shown that they're able to create viable communities and people collaborating and at peace, I think we can really do something good. Here are some of the references, and with this I will stop and see if you have any comments or questions. You can leave something in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask whatever you want to ask. Thank you very much. Wojciech, you have a comment for me? Okay, here is a question from this. So, any intervention from outside, financial support or appointing a chief, it's not going to be politically neutral. It's always going to upset the power structure and the social structure of the village. So my approach is that we better be honest about it and see how we can support community leaders who have shown that they respect their people and want to bring progress and bring services to their people. Yeah. There are also a lot who just want to act important and be leaders, but don't do anything. So that is my approach. Now, official development aid is based on this fiction that it doesn't want to substitute the state. So it does a lot of little projects, and they are very shy of getting involved in politics. So the approach has not worked at all. As you know, in 50 years, nothing has changed in Busamang Village. Now enter the stage the Chinese. So the Chinese, they have no qualms about being apolitical. So they just ask people, or they ask the government what it wants or what it needs, and they say, we need an airport, we need a port, we need a road. And then the Chinese, they say, all right, we'll lend you the money and we will build it for you. No local engineers or local workers involved. And then you pay us interest for the rest of your life. So that is a real threat in the Pacific. It's called debt trap diplomacy. So these small island nations, they are all given gigantic loans by the Chinese, who build ports, or now in Papua New Guinea, they're building a fish processing plant for the Chinese to process their fish and make profits. And that is really a negative investment situation or development. So either we become much better at supporting villages and community leaders who work positively towards results, or the Chinese will come and they will work only with the central government, only on to get access to mining resources, and that's it. So it's quite a worrying prospect. The Chinese are also not shy militarily. So they are building naval bases. They have hired the port. They've leased the port of Darwin, as we know. So it's really something is changing in the Pacific, and the West doesn't have an answer. And what I want to make clear with this talk is that from the perspective of a villager in Papua New Guinea, is saying, well, for 50 years we have tried it the Western way. We have tried it with democracy, and now it hasn't worked. So let's try the Chinese. And they don't see that the Chinese will not recognize any individual constitutional rights, and will just trample over the local population. All right, Dennis, that was a kind of a long answer, but I hope that explains it. Then Jay has a question on whether these are one-time or a continuous support. Well, yeah, the answer is it can be, both. Obviously, children's uniforms would need to be a continuous support, but just by doing this once, it will create such a, it will create such a positive climate around this village, and it will be such a support for the village leaders that the state will possibly also step up. And because the members of parliament, they have funds for local development, but they just steal them, So that is one of the problems in Papua New Guinea, that the politicians are hopelessly corrupt and they're all thieves. So if you can see that villages, find their own way, then maybe you can shame them into some action. We never lose hope. All right. Jay, is that an answer to your question? All right. Anybody else wants to make a comment? You can also unmute yourself and talk. We can all hear you.
Yeah, Albert, thanks for the lecture. My question would be, what's your sort of prediction of these dynamics between the West, including Australia and China, playing out in Papua New Guinea? There has been this response to some extent from the US Australian side, promising electrification of the country. But of course, Chinese also have their interest. So what is your estimate of the future dynamics of this?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, sorry, Wojciech, my phone disconnected, but I think I got most of your question. You were asking about a prediction on how this will play out. Well, it is of course a continental scale kind of game, so it's hard to say how it will end up. We know what China's interests are. The US and Australia and the Western powers are much less assertive. The Papua New Guineans, at the moment, they love the Chinese. Papua New Guinea became last year one of the Belt and Road Initiative countries by signing up to this fishing plant project in Daru. So they have made their choice, and now they will have to live with the consequences. Nevertheless, I think we should continue to work with local community leaders and help them because the government sellout will not produce any benefits for the people of Papua New Guinea. This week, the ATM machines ran out of cash again. They run from one loan to the other. Eventually, they're going to have to default on their loans. And then you get a kind of a Latin American scenario where the currency will devaluate massively. They will not be able to import fuel and other things. So my prediction is that this will get worse before it gets any better.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will probably agree with you on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can take it offline and discuss a bit more. I mean, making predictions about the future is always difficult, but we know demographically what's going on. So population growth is not leveling off, and that means that economic growth needs to be at least 5% a year, and they're not achieving that. So the country is getting poorer instead of richer, which means that development is not happening, which is confirming the Busamang picture that in 50 years trying with democracy and capitalism hasn't worked out for them. So they go, well, let's try the Chinese, and who can blame them?